Much so. In 1665, there was a revolution. So a brilliant man wrote last year, or he promised me some of last night's extra beer if I said that. I will hold you to it. So this revolution doesn't perhaps look revolutionary to us. It was not brought about by the affordances of the sword or the pen, or even the gun, but by small pellets of lead made into movable type, this incredible invention of the 15th century. The journal that was made from it was arguably the first scientific journal. It was peer-reviewed, and again, this is something that's so natural to us that we may not even think twice about it, but there is debate about it amongst historians, as you can imagine, but it's possible that this is the first peer-reviewed journal. It's certainly the longest-running one, because as we all know, it's still publishing today, the Philosophical Transactions. Its aim was to bring the new philosophy, sometimes called experimental philosophy, to the public. Extraordinarily, it was in English. Again, these are odd things to say to us, but the language of scholarship then was Latin, and lingua franca, of course, lingua franca, as we say in English, across the world. And to publish in English means that ideas can reach a much wider audience. Now, this isn't in any way to say that this was available to the public in the way that our public libraries are. Not so many people could read. Certainly, this was beyond the economic reach of the vast majority of the population, but nonetheless, it's an enormous step in that direction. And the language was deliberately chosen to be open and transparent, and to take a narrative approach, setting out methodologies, explaining what worked and what didn't work. And really set the tone for an awful lot of scientific debate ever since. And one of the lovely things about it was that they thought by making it public, by demonstrating this knowledge in public, it was part of the production process. So this idea that taking your research to the public will increase it to the good of everybody. This came from the Philosophical Transactions. So who were the Royal Society who produced this? They were, more formally, the President, Council and Fellows of the Royal Society of London for Improving Natural Knowledge, which is why we call it the Royal Society. It got its Royal Charter in 1660 as a college for the promoting of physico-mathematical experimental learning. I love the language of this period. This is the easy-to-understand, transparent language of the period, I should say. Its motto, wonderfully, is Nullius in verba, which roughly translates as, don't take anyone's word for it, trust nobody until you see the method and until you can understand and reproduce the research for yourself. Again, these are ideas not unfamiliar to us. Meetings date back to at least 1645. There was a philosophical club, or society it became known as, in Oxford, and also meetings in Gresham College amongst great thinkers of the day who worked in natural philosophy, which was what we call science now. They worked in the pursuit of science in its original meaning, as in knowledge, rather than anything approaching a prototype STEM discipline. And they were following Galileo and Francis Bacon. They were the great proponents of this natural philosophy, experimental philosophy. And the Philosophical Transactions were the work of Henry Oldenburg, who's bloated even fatter than that picture shows him to be by the stretched out slides. So I do apologise to him. He was an extraordinary man, a theologian and natural philosopher, of course, a diplomat, an amazing linguist, and he was the joint first secretary of the Royal Society. The other first secretary was John Wilkins, who was warden of Wadham College in Oxford here. Not everyone was a fan. He was imprisoned in 1667 for spying during the Second Anglo-Dutch War. He was released, but he was actually giving intelligence to the other side. He was a spy for the English. He was German-born. Spent a lot of time living in France and England as well as Germany. And as you see, really not everyone liked him. Robert Hooke, who's one of the more irritable, if one of the more brilliant members of the Royal Society, said those who then knew Mr. Oldenburg understood well enough how little he himself knew of philosophic matter. He's really grumpy, Hooke, because one of the French members of a similar academy college, and the Montmort Academy, that Oldenburg had attended in the 50s, in the 1650s, had accused the Royal Society of being of having taken their ideas. Yes, so he's in a big grump and is trying to point out that the English version of the Royal Society and its forebears were happening long before they had any such thing in France, so he definitely didn't copy the French. I love how these academic debates go through the centuries at this level of grumpiness as well. So ideas then are socially constituted, and ideas of knowledge grow as we share them. This is the scholarly social machine that we hear so much about, fourth quadrant stuff. But it's not only ideas that have a social life. Books are social objects too, and as they said, we have in fact 3 copies of the first issue of the Software Transactions in the Bodleian. This comes from the one that used to belong to Christopher Wren. And in this, you can see perhaps from the list of contents, I hope you can read it, quite how broad-ranging the content was. Henry Oldenburg wrote in his dedicatory letter at the beginning that it was about the happy inventions of obliging men all over the world to the general benefit of mankind. And I love this from the introduction slightly later, so that people feel that they're invited and encouraged to search, try and find out new things, impart their knowledge to one another, and contribute what they can to the grand design for improving natural knowledge. I still think these are wonderful things to live by, and it's also, so far, so many weeks. It's also worth remembering what incredibly troubled times they lived through. In 1645 to 1660, so the beginning of the meetings in Oxford and London, to when the Royal Society got its charter. This is right through the Civil War, the 17th century Civil War, which set families against families, which touched the lives of most people in the country. And the Royal Society and its forebears outlawed any discussion of politics, religion, or the news, except in as much as it related to philosophy in their meetings. It's hard now, I think, to remember the shock of having a divinely anointed king overthrown and executed all in their lifetimes, and then 15 years later reinstated. Many of them actually were parliamentarians, not royalists, but regardless of their political views, the upset and shock is not something that's just restricted to the news channels today. And their answer is to discuss philosophy, to discuss science, to increase knowledge and talk to people across the world. I think we could do worse than follow their example. And here we are, the social objects of the book. This one's Christopher Wren's. It belonged to several owners before it came to Christopher Wren's hands. He was the civilian professor of astronomy. Henry Savile was master of Merton College, a great friend of Thomas Bodley, who we founded our library. And he endowed 2 chairs of civilian professors of astronomy and geometry, which are still posted by today. And the second copy, as you can see, was Edmund Halley's. That one we may not be able to see today. It's in quite a poor state of repair because it's, let's say, it's been read to death, rather than Edmund Halley had no idea how to look after his book, and neither have subsequent readers. Christopher Wren's book, on the other hand, is really well kept, and although it's got annotations in it, which make it fascinating to people who like such things, it's in a really good state of repair. And the third copy was in the Radcliffe Library, which is the original science library. So our invitation to you today is to a stellar panel. We have 3 amazing experts: Howard Watson, who's an intellectual historian from here at Oxford; Chris Lintott, in case you haven't heard enough of him this morning, and how could one ever have enough of him? And who's going to put it in the bigger picture of open science and what it means to society today and in the future. And Anna Marie Ross, who's from the University of Lincoln, who's an expert in the Royal Society in particular, but history of medicine and science in general. So come today at lunchtime, if you would like, to the Weston Library. They've said, this is a new building. It hasn't even, so new that the builders are still in. So apologies in advance for any disruption that causes. What did I do? It's actually saying you've had enough of me. So at 1 o'clock today in the Weston Library, you are warmly invited to come and listen to a conversation. It will be an informal conversation about all these things. Thank you very much. And followed by an open discussion and a chance to see these books, my copies from Rare Books, and to have at least 1 or 2 of the copies there in the room for you to thumb through. Does this work? It does. We are here. We have to go southeast to get to the Weston Library, which is there. Those of you who've known Oxford a little while, it used to be called the New Bodleian, it's just the open to Weston. If you choose to go east-ish and then south, you will pass the E-Research Centre, which some of you will know from last night, the home of our host for the conference. Past, it's called Pitt Rivers, which is there, but it's also the University Museum of Natural History at the heart of the Science Quarter, which grew up around it in the 19th century. If you're not so keen on books, they've got great dinosaurs and 2 dodos. If you walk past here, this bit that strangely says University of Oxford is actually Wadham College. You will see where John Wilkins was born in. And here, most importantly, is the King's Arms, which is right opposite the entrance. This is the entrance that you'll need to use. I'm afraid that the public-facing part of the Weston Library isn't opening until March, so there is only one entrance. Alternatively, if you come down St Giles and up up Broad Street, you will pass the Sheldonian Theatre, which was Christopher Wren's second building. His first was in in Cambridge. And it's the ceremonial hall of the university. You can see some of Christopher Wren's other work. The capacity is 117, so there isn't room for all of you, I'm afraid, those of you who are brave enough to walk through our traditional way, which we've organised specially. So if you could possibly sign up on a sheet at reception, either in the break now or just before you go, people will be taking that list with you. There will also be people walking that way who can show you where they're going. Our lovely Thomas Wadley, to whom we are enormously grateful, wrote this inscription after he built the library. That isn't Thomas Wadley, by the way, that's from a bit later in the century. He says he built this library for you and for the Republic of Letters, the Republic of the Learned. That's us. You know, the gift turned out well. We're absolutely delighted to be hosting, I think, the first celebrations of the 350th anniversary of philosophical transactions, and we'd love to see you there. Thanks very much.
Thank you.